In today's episode, we discuss the historic coaster that shattered records as it rang in the new millennium. Welcome to Airtime Traveler. How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the Roller Coaster History Podcast. You are listening to Airtime Traveler. My name is Nathan Grace, and I'm joined by my wife and lovely co-host.
Hey, I'm Haley Grace.
And thank you for tuning in to today's episode. It's episode 30! Episode 30 of the podcast.
I'm so excited. I just can't hide it. I don't know.
I don't even know is that a real song that you're singing, or is that
what?
Or you're just ad-libbing?
Yeah, it's like I'm so excited, I just can't hide it.
I'm out of the loop. I
Seriously?
I don't know what song that
It's
is.
Classic. I can't
know.
remember the name of it, but because I'm really, really bad with names of songs and authors, and yeah.
Well, we've got a very.
I can't believe you don't know this.
I mean, it sounds slightly familiar, but I don't know.
I'm totally
out
play
of the.
this for you later.
I'm out of the loop with modern music for sure.
It's
so
not modern.
I'm out of the loop with anything that's not my music.
Me?
I seriously no. We're not playing this on the podcast. We've got too much to cover today. We got an exciting episode today. I wanted to pick a very popular coaster and story to talk about for our milestone episode 30. And so this is the longest script I've ever written, so we got to get through this intro quick and jump right into things. So if this is your first time listening to the podcast here at Airtime Traveler, we do roller coaster history, but rather than talk about the history of the roller coaster in general, we take one roller coaster and we talk all about the history of that individual coaster. So I'm a roller coaster enthusiast and have been for a long time. And my wife, Haley, is a member of the GP, or the general public.
The cool one.
So I'm here to do the research and tell the stories, and she's here to make me more interesting.
You say that every time.
And I won't let... It's our
mantra.
That's the thing, yeah. So I've said it every time, and I'm going to continue to say it. So you call it.
I don't feel like I make you more interesting. I feel like you're very interesting.
Well, I think the whole reason I asked you to do the podcast with me is because I listen to podcasts, and I feel like podcasts are more interesting when there's multiple people discussing.
Yeah.
Like if it's just one person, and not to say there aren't interesting podcasts that are just one person, but I tend to gravitate more towards podcasts that are 2, 3, even 4 or more people.
Yeah.
I just feel it's more natural when you're not talking to a microphone, you're talking to a person. So right. I feel like in that way it makes it more interesting, at least to me. So maybe our listeners feel differently. Maybe they'd rather just listen to you, but
just me? I hope not.
Well, I think the only thing I want to talk about as far as news, we mentioned in our last episode that we had some really exciting news. And in case you missed it, we did do a Coaster Conversations episode talking about this, and it's been all over our social media. But we were invited to go to the town hall meeting at Silver Dollar City last week when they announced Fire in the Hole. So that was our very first media event that we were invited to.
It was sweet.
And it was an awesome experience. And just wanted to say thank you for, this is being episode 30 and our first media event. Just thank you for all the support that, you've given the podcast over the last year and a half. We've, basically tripled in size as far as how many views we had or how many listens we had last summer versus how many we're getting right now. So
yeah, which is so cool.
We really appreciate you. Those of you that have shared the podcast on your socials or shared it with other enthusiasts that we just really appreciate the support, and we look forward to continuing to do the podcast for a long time.
I know that each and every follower that we get excited. Like, oh, we got a new follower today. So we look and we appreciate it, and we're grateful for each and every one of you.
And we've grown not so much listeners for the podcast, but our our Twitter followers has grown tremendously over the last 30 days between the media event, and we've had a couple bigger influencers in the industry share some of our stuff, and so we're almost at 200 followers as of today. We may hit 200 followers by the time this episode comes out, and we just hit 100 like a month or two ago, so it's been exciting to see the growth and how many people are enjoying our content. And
for sure,
so we just appreciate you guys for all your support, and hope you continue to enjoy. So with that being said, let's jump into today's topic, because like I said, I've got a large script for today, mostly because this is a coaster that is one of the most famous roller coasters of all time, and so there's like not like a ton of history to talk about because it's not that old, but because it's so popular, everything about it is so well documented that there's just lots of content to find, and lots of little tidbits that you might not be able to get with other coasters that aren't as well documented. So we're going back to Cedar Point today. Okay. And we're going to talk about Millennium Force.
All right.
So definitely one of the more popular coasters we've ever talked about. Got a couple stats here. So opened in 2000, $25 million, 6,595 feet long, 310 feet tall, with a top speed of 93 miles per hour. Average wait time so far this year is 46 minutes. So that checks out. I feel like when we went, it was really quiet.
It was quiet.
And also the first time we rode Millennium Force, we got ERT. So the line was barely anything. And then the second time, I think we waited 20 or 30 minutes. And that was, it wasn't bad, but we really were there during a very quiet period. So, 46 minutes checks out as far as what I would expect the line to be on average. So,
which still, that's not a too bad of a wait time.
It's not too bad, but more what it is in the summer, it's going to be an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours. And then during the quiet parts of the year, it gets down to 30, 20 minutes. And then that averages out to, your 46 minutes total. So, which, I don't know, that does make sense. So, in the CoasterBot rankings, it ranks at number 15 in the country. I don't think is that the highest? I actually can't, let me see. I think this might actually be the highest rated one we've talked about so far. I'm kind of going through in my head. Because Phantom's Revenge is slightly below it, as we'll talk about in a second. So I think this might be the highest ranked coaster we've covered so far.
Okay.
Just off the top of my head. So it ranks below coasters such as Fury 325 at Carowinds, Intimidator 305 at King's Dominion, and Sky Rush at Hershey Park. It ranks above coasters such as Phantom's Revenge at Kennywood, Mako at SeaWorld Orlando, and Orion at Kings Island. At Cedar Point, it ranks third. So number 1 is Steel Vengeance, number 2 Maverick, Millennium Force number 3, and then it's Magnum XL200, Raptor, Gatekeeper, Valraven, Gemini, Ruger at number 9, Blue Streak at number 10, and then some of the other smaller rides after that. So review of the name, I think it's a very solid name.
Yeah.
Obviously, part of the the name comes from opening in the year 2000. That's the whole reason behind the beginning of the new Millennium Force. So it's it makes sense. I like the name. Yeah. The actual, when I was doing research, I guess the original name was just going to be Millennium. Like that was Millennium was going to be the name of the ride. So I like the addition of Millennium Force. I think that's better.
Yeah,
I think it's a better name than just Millennium. So. The ride has a couple logos. This one is the one that's used in on the website and things like that. And then there's a different logo that's actually outside of the ride, which we'll look at later. But actually, did I put the? I did not. That's okay. But we'll see. I have the ride sign later in here. But I think it's a solid logo. It's obviously very basic, but I think it's eye catchy. Yeah, and it's very clean, you know, and so I think very modern. I don't think this is a 23-year-old logo, but I don't think it looks 23 years old. It looks very, very modern for sure. Yeah. So, Yeah, so I think it's a good logo. View of the paint scheme. I mean, it's pretty basic. It's just a dark blue paint scheme, or light blue, depending on how you look at it, I guess. Some of the reports that I looked at, like newspaper articles and things, said purple. Like when it was first being built, people kept calling it purple, and I don't see any purple.
See purple.
So I don't know if maybe the first few pieces got there, and they were like, "This is the wrong color," and then they repainted everything after that. But yeah, there's no purple in this. But I mean, I think it's fine. So I think it works.
It does.
It's not like one of the. It's not super eye-catching, but I don't think it needs to be because the ride is absolutely massive. I think that's what's eye-catching about it.
I was going to say the same thing. Like, you don't need something eye-catchy for the logo on this one because of how big the ride is in general.
For the paint job, you mean? For the paint scheme?
Yeah.
You said logo.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, but yes. So, yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think to talk about the trains. Yeah, so they have 3 trains. All of them have the same basic, like the blue and the silver, and then the colors that are different are so like on here, this is the yellow train. There's a yellow train, a red train, and a blue train.
Do you remember which ones we went on?
I have no idea. I have no idea. So, but I think they're, again, very clean looking. So, yeah, I have no complaints. I
like the front of the train, the little stripes going up I don't know.
Yeah.
I like that.
Kind of reminds me of Gemini a little bit, which is kind of interesting. I don't know if that was on purpose or if that was just coincidental. So here's the park's description of the ride. A looming giant amongst a park full of them, Millennium Force was designed for the purpose of proving bigger is better. What better way to ring in the new millennium than with a brand new record-breaking coaster that would change coaster history forever. In fact, Millennium Force's creation demanded an all-new category, just to classify its one-of-a-kind nature. Thus was born the Giga Coaster. Being the tallest roller coaster and the first to top 300 feet, wasn't the only records broken when it opened in 2000. It debuted having the longest drop and the fastest speed, topping out at 93 miles per hour. It's a really long description. I'm not going to do the whole thing.
Okay.
You get the idea, though. So it basically, the whole description is just talking about how record-breaking it was. So, which is, yeah, makes sense. And we'll talk about that more, obviously. This has always been the catch line for the ride, is the future is riding on it, which is kind of a fun little catchphrase that has kind of a double meaning to it. Like, it's the future's riding on it as like the future depends on it, but then like the future's riding on it, like the future is riding on the coaster. It's like the fun little double meaning to the motto there. So,
isn't there like a actual term for that?
For a phrase that has 2 different meanings.
Yeah.
I don't know. I
don't know. I feel like
I've never been an English.
I was going to say, I feel like that's an English major kind of thing.
Customer reviews. I just wanted to mention, I'm going to start doing this. I'll actually mention what the rating is on Google reviews, just because I pulled some of the lowest reviews, just because they're kind of the ones that are more interesting to read. But this one, Millennium Force has a 4.8 out of 5. So don't take these reviews to say that it has terrible ratings on Google reviews. That's just the ones I picked. So. Here's a 1-star, awesome ride, probably my favorite here, but horrible line. It is somewhat slow because they need to wait for the last train to return before they can send the next train. But what makes it awful is that they let the Fast Pass riders cut in front so much that the regular line never moves. I saw a lot of complaints about Fast Pass in here, which is kind of an interesting thing. Like, I get it's a difficult thing because for those that buy the Fast Pass, it's a great experience because you feel like you're getting your money's worth. But then for all those that can't afford it or don't want to pay that much, it kind of hurts their experience. So it's kind of, I don't know, it's a tricky situation to manage the balance there.
We didn't get Fast Passes because we really didn't need them.
Oh no, we certainly didn't need them. So it was not a problem while we were there.
Yeah.
Let's see. Here's the next one. Another 1-star. Yes, it was moderately fun, but for a 300-foot coaster, it was boring. The first drop is the only thrill on this ride. You don't go back up after the first drop, which is an essential component to a coaster like this. It banks instead. I guess what he's trying to say is that it doesn't go into an airtime hill after the first drop, like it goes into that big overbanked turn. So, I don't know. I can kind of see it, but I wouldn't classify it as boring. No. Saying a 300-foot coaster is boring, I think, is a little extreme, because you're going 93 miles an hour. How could that be boring?
Does he think... I want to know what his thoughts are on Intimidator, like 305.
Yeah, because that's an interesting one, because there's less airtime on that one, but it's more intense, so I don't know.
I'm kind of confused by that, but...
1 star, too scary to even show up. 0 out of 10. I still don't understand why some people feel the need to leave a review for something they didn't do, but okay. 1 star, I like the Millennium Force ride to ride it in the front seat in the morning time.
Ooh.
Okay.
Alright, I guess we need to ride it in the morning.
Well, the question I have here is the review doesn't match the rating. There's 1 star. I like the Millennium Force ride to ride in the front seat in the morning time. I don't know. Maybe they meant to do 5 star. Here's another 1 star. I'm just doing a project about roller coasters.
That's a great.
Then why did you need to leave a review?
He needed the extra credit.
Is that what it was? They said if you go leave ratings on roller coasters, I'll give you 5 bonus points.
That's really funny.
Here's 3 stars. Great ride. Gotten a rattle though. Has quite a bland layout. This ride, in my opinion, very overrated, but that drop still is amazing. The one thing I will say here, it definitely had a little bit of a rattle when we went on it. That's kind of the older the Intamin coasters get, that kind of is something I've noticed on older Intamins, is that they start to develop a rattle as they get older. So I definitely did notice that, but I don't think it
affected the ride.
Yeah, I still enjoyed it, despite that. Here's another 3 star. Good ride, nothing to rave about. Worst Giga in the US. Now, I have to say, you and I have now you've been on 3 of the 4 Giga coasters, and I've been on all 4 of them in the US. There's another one in North America.
Which ones I've been on.
So you've been on this one,
yes.
Intimidator 305, and Orion. And then I've been on Fury 325. So those are the 4 Gigas in the US. And I would agree that Millennium Force is...
Yeah.
Well, you haven't been on Fury, but...
Based on what you've told me, yes, I'd probably rank it.
Because I would say you probably rank Orion first out of those 3 that you've been on.
That one or Intimidator.
Oh, so you're 50-50 on which one of those.
It's a close second, I feel like Intimidator is.
Okay. So if you like Orion the best, then you would like Fury even more than Orion. Because it's basically very similar, but it's a longer ride. So, So that being said, I would agree with this person that it's the worst Giga in the US, but that doesn't make it like a bad ride. Like, the worst Giga in the US is still better than 95% of the coasters in the country, if not more. So saying it's the worst Giga is not a bad thing, because it's still, one of the best coasters in the country for sure. And it's the oldest of all the Gigas, so that kind of makes sense. Yeah. You would expect them to get better with time. So.
Right.
And then here's the last one. This is this is total nonsense. You ready for this? Dropped. She just read a little bit. Dropped fidget spinner on ride, and it got in the gears and broke the ride down for 3 hours. Okay, if that wasn't ridiculous enough, wait for this next part. That is totally not true. The crewmen played rock, paper, scissors to see who went and got the spinner. They picked scissors for 2 hours until one of them picked paper. No, there's no way.
There's no
way that you, first of all, that you watched them play rock, paper, scissors for 2 hours. And 2, that they all picked scissors for 2 hours. That is absurd. Don't feed me these lies. And then he closes us out by saying KD is 7 foot, which is a basketball meme that has nothing to do with any of this. So.
Okay.
So
I want to know if this story is true.
I have no idea. The
like
first,
at least
because
the first part
sounds like something that could happen.
Maybe,
but the rock paper scissors thing is total. It's total fabrication. So I have no idea. Well, that's an interesting review. So, well, those are our customer reviews for Millennium Force. Our intro to Millennium Force. Let's talk about the history of Millennium Force.
Okay.
So we're going to go back to 1996. All right, here we are, 1996.
I'm actually kind of surprised on how far back we're going for this ride.
Well, I mean, it was constructed in 2000, so
okay, so
need
4
a few
years,
a few years beforehand. So we're in 1996, the year both of us were born. So
good year, man.
Yeah, that's a good year. So leading up to 96, Cedar Point had really just kind of been continuing its tradition of building record-breaking coasters, which kind of started, I mean, it really started with Gemini, but it really kicked off after they built Magnum XL 200 in 1989. That was basically when they determined that like that ride was so successful for them that this was like the new future for Cedar Point. We're going to be the coast, like we're going to be the amusement park that breaks coaster records, right?
Yep. And
so,
they have.
What's that?
And they have.
And they have. So, you know,
over and over and over again.
So 89 was Magnum XL 200. In 91, they opened Mean Streak, which was the tallest wooden coaster in the world. 94, the Raptor opened as the tallest and fastest inverted coaster. And then in 96, where we're at, the park had just opened Mantis, which was the tallest and fastest stand-up coaster in the world. So, you know, this tradition of, you know, continuing to build the biggest and fastest roller coasters on Earth. Well, also in 96, another coaster would open across the globe. So this coaster is called Fujiyama. And it opened at Fuji-Q Highland in Fujiyoshida, Japan. The name Fujiyama means King of Coasters. So it's a humble name. So Fujiyama would break the record for the tallest and fastest roller coaster in the world at the time. I should have put the stats in here, but I think it's like around 250, 260 feet tall, somewhere in there. So by this point, Magnum had already lost the record to Steel Phantom and the big one. But Fujiyama was kind of, you know, we've talked about the Coaster Wars several times.
Right.
Fujiyama was just part of this this whole process of coasters that were becoming bigger and faster and, you know, pushing the records, you know, throughout the 90s and into the 2000s. So Cedar Point didn't hold the record when this coaster opened. I think the big one it's at Thorpe Park, I think, right? Oh, the UK fans are gonna be mad at me for not knowing. I'm pretty sure it's at Thorpe Park.
They're rolling their eyes right now.
No.
Like,
it's
how dare he?
Blackpool Pleasure Beach. That's where it's at. At.
I don't even know. So I mean,
I'm like 90% sure I'm right on that now. So, I'm sorry, UK fans. I haven't been there yet. I'm still learning. But yeah, so that one held the record at the time, I think, and then this one opened and took the record for tallest and fastest, I think. So by 1998, Cedar Point officials were basically like, we're going to take the record back. That was like their next big thing after building these more like coasters that were kind of a niche thing. It was like, you know, we wanted the biggest inverted coaster and the biggest stand-up coaster and the biggest wooden coaster. Now we just want to go biggest coaster. Like we're just going to go get the record.
Go home, right?
Yeah, go get the record that Magnum had when we opened it in 89. We're going to go get that record back. So rumors had been flying. At this point, enthusiasts knew that Cedar Point was, you know, where all the action was at, right? So rumors had been flying like crazy among the enthusiast community just because they knew, you know, they wanted Cedar Point to do something crazy for the year 2000.
I'd love to be an enthusiast during this time.
I thought about that when I was doing this episode. Like, what must have it been like to be an enthusiast
during the
Coaster Wars, to just see all these records just being destroyed
over
and over. Because that doesn't happen anymore.
No.
I mean, a lot of the coasters we're seeing announced right now are more family style coasters.
Yeah.
Like, that is definitely the trend right now. So, which is fine. I get that you have to appeal to the general public to make the money to keep the parks open. So you do what you got to do. But yeah, it is interesting. So here's some of the rumors. These I pulled from using Wayback Machine. So these are like some of the, because this is like early days of the internet, right?
Yeah.
And so I was able to pull some things that had been posted. So I'm not going to read all of these, but some of the things that were rumored was like, what I got some of them here. 200-foot plus looping coaster by B&M or Aerodynamics. There was a source that said that park officials told them that B&M was going to build a 300-foot 10 inversion coaster, which obviously didn't happen, but that's a crazy idea. What was this one? Rumors are wild. Best one I've heard is a dual lift coaster. First half would be 335 feet. The second, 295 feet with a total of 13 inversions. Like, just all these crazy rumors that people are clearly just making up because none of them are even close to what happened. So it's just super funny that people just, make up stuff just to make up stuff. I don't know why, but...
Just speculating, man.
I mean, there's a difference between speculating, though, and saying, I heard the park official said, blah, 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 blah. Like, there's a difference between that and saying, what if they, so it's just funny to me. So in November of 1998, the board of directors for Cedar Fair met to finalize the attraction. So this is a quote from one of the board members about what the CEO, Dick Kinzel, wanted. Quote, what he wanted was a ride that would surpass Magnum but would carry the same genetic code. Steel structure, tubular steel track, no inversions, high capacity, world-class stats, highest, steepest, fastest, end quote. So, pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
So that was the day they basically said, we're going to go for the 300-foot mark. That's our goal. So they also determined the location of the new coaster. It was going to be on the southeast bay of the park near the Frontier Trail. And though the park had recently done lots of great work with B&M, because I think the last two coasters that they had built were B&M, Raptor, and Mantis. B&M was never really considered for the project because at that point B&M didn't do coasters that were non-inverting. Now, what they didn't know is B&M actually was working on a non-inverting coaster because in 1999, they opened Apollo's Chariot at Busch Gardens, which was their first hyper coaster. So just like, Candemonium and some of the other Diamondback, those are some of the, hyper coasters that B&M's done in the meantime. But at that point, that wasn't really a thing. And B&M didn't cross the 300-foot mark until 2012. So who knows if they would have even been interested if they asked them. Could have completely changed things if they did, but they never even considered them, really. But the two companies that were considered for the project were Morgan and Intamin. Now, initially, from this is how the story goes. And the story is kind of compiled from park officials, Morgan, and Intamin. So there's some discrepancies in the story, but it pretty much all checks out. So this is basically how the story goes, okay? So Morgan was initially approached for the project. Now, the reason for that is Morgan had recently done a lot of work with Cedar Fair because they had built 3 hypercoasters. So this one's Wild Thing Valley Fair, and then they did Steel Force at Dorney Park, and then this is Mamba at Worlds of Fun, right? So they had built those in 1998 through 2000. No, wait. 1990. I got those dates wrong. What was it? 96 through 98. So during this development process leading up to Millennium Force, they had built these hypercoasters for Cedar Fair. And people were pretty happy with them. And they were really high capacity. They performed well. So Cedar Fair was really happy with the hypercoasters. So they basically just asked Morgan, could we do the same thing, but push it from 200 feet to 300 feet? That was essentially the idea, right?
Right.
So Morgan started, putting together their layout, putting together, what their proposal and all these different things. And the problem was they started to run into some technical issues that became an issue for doing a 300-foot coaster versus a 200-foot coaster. So there was two main holdups, one small one and then one big one. So the small issue was that their current wheel design wasn't going to hold up to the higher speeds. So, I mean, because you think about it, the faster a coaster goes, the more friction that wheel is generating.
Right.
And so if you don't have the right materials, then that wheel is just going to fail, or just, takes so much heat that, it doesn't run properly. There's all kinds of, I'm not an engineer, so there's all kinds of technical terms and things that, go into that. But you can counteract that by doing a bigger wheel, which is basically what Morgan's solution was going to be. So that seemed like that was going to be okay, that they were just going to do a bigger wheel, which means less friction, less wear and tear. If the coaster is going 30% faster, but you do a 30% bigger wheel, theoretically, the temperature and the, wear and tear should, be about the same. Anyway, that was the idea behind it. But the big problem was that their lift hill technology was not... It was going to present a problem as far as how long it was going to take the train to get to the top of the hill and how big the lift hill was going to be. So this is a little diagram that someone put together. I have it later in the presentation who did this, so I'll shout them out in a second. But so this is basically what Magnum's lift hill is. Okay, so it's about 30 degrees. From ground to, it's basically a 30-degree angle lift hill, right? And from, the station, or from the beginning of the lift hill to where it starts to drop down, is about 360-ish feet. Okay. If you take that same math and work it up to 300 feet, that means your lift hill is roughly, it's almost 600 feet long, which is quite a bit of distance. So,
right.
So that was going to be a problem as far as working, a 600-foot lift hill into or not 600 feet long. The footprint of the lift hill is going to be 600 feet long. Working that into the layout and finding the space to put that. The other big problem is that they were concerned with how long it was going to take to get the trains up to the top. So I did the math on this because I couldn't find it. So I watched the three hypercoasters just pull up their POVs and timed them. And they take about 50 seconds to get to the top of their hills. Like once you start up the chain lift, it takes about 50 seconds to get from the top up till we start to go over the first drop.
Right.
So that means for 300 feet, it would be about a minute and 15 seconds just going up the lift hill.
I wouldn't like that.
And that's the problem. It takes so long, and that really hurts capacity too.
Right.
Because you can't send another train
until it gets up
and over. And even then, depending on where your next block zone is, you might have to wait even longer after that. So you're looking at maybe a 2-minute interval on how often you can send out the train. I don't know. So that really hurts your capacity. So that was a problem. So with all these things in mind that they're struggling with this now, basically it was almost a done deal. Like Cedar Point had almost signed the contract. They basically had told Morgan to put together this proposal. Morgan was putting all these pieces together, but it seemed like Cedar Point just wanted to see if there was a better solution. And so that's where Intamin comes into the picture. So Intamin at this point had a longer history of building roller coasters. Morgan was pretty new to the industry.
Yeah.
The three hypercoasters they did were basically their first three big projects, other than like little stuff. But Intamin had been doing things for several years up to this point. Most recently, they had done Volcano the Blast Coaster at King's Dominion, which was not owned by Cedar Fair at this point, but was still a big deal in the industry. And then the most recent projects they had done were their 400-foot shuttle coasters, which were Tower of Terror at Dreamworld and Superman the Escape at Six Flags Magic Mountain. So those were a big deal because they were the first coasters to go over 100 miles per hour. So Intamin was being intimate and breaking all kinds of records, which nowadays they're known for. But at this point, they were kind of still in the early stages of that. So Intamin came into the picture and offered, according to Dana Morgan, which is the CEO of Morgan, makes sense.
Yeah.
He says that Intamin offered a bid that was several $1 million less than Morgan's, but was also a lot shorter. So Morgan's proposal seems to have been a much longer layout. We'll get to that later. But there were several other factors that ultimately led Cedar Point to sign a deal with Intamin. Now, so Intamin had better wheel technology because, like we said, they already had a coaster that was 100 plus miles per hour. It was a completely different model, but the idea is they knew how to do wheels that could withstand that kind of speed. The difference was they had to withstand that kind of speed for like a minute instead of, the shuttle coasters at Six Flags Magic Mountain. It's like 10 seconds. So that's the difference there. But they felt confident that they could put together a wheel compound that would be able to withstand that kind of, speed and friction. And more importantly, Intamin had a brilliant solution for the lift hill. So what Intamin came up with, which was basically brand new to the industry, was a cable lift. So where most coasters have the chain, and so I'm going to try to dumb down roller coaster engineering. Basically, roller coaster chains are continuously moving. And when the train is ready, they just push out onto the lift hill. It catches the chain, and then the chain lifts it to the top of the hill.
Right.
Cable lifts are different, where the cable basically goes, there's a winch at the bottom of the lift hill. It can also be it can either be down by the station or it can be up by where the crest of the lift hill is. Either way. Basically, there's a winch, and the best way I can describe it in layman's terms is it's kind of like reeling up a fishing rod. So one end of the cable hooks to the coaster car, and then the winch basically just winds up the cable, and then the cable is pulled up to the top of the hill. But the difference is it's not continuously going, so once it's done, the winch has to lower it back down to the station to go to the next train. So the reason this was a good solution was the cables at that time were much lighter than the chains, and so they were way faster. And so, what Morgan was going to take about 1:15 seconds to get to the top of the lift hill, the Intamin's cable lift would take just about 25 seconds, which is that's a big difference.
Yeah.
So you can even see when you go to the park, you will easily get to the top of Millennium Force's lift hill faster than that 300-foot lift hill. You'll get to the top faster than Magnum's 200-foot lift hill. That's just the difference in technology there of using the cable lift versus the chain lift. So the technology also allowed them to angle the lift hill up to 45 degrees instead of the 30 degrees that Morgan was going to use. So, by the way, here's the person I got these from. These graphs are from Theme Park Tourists, so I'll be sure to tag them when I post these on social media. I feel like I've heard of them before. Possibly, we may have used some of their stuff in another episode, but I don't know. So this shows you that using the 45 degree, that actually decreased the footprint of Millennium Force's lift hill to be even less than Magnum's lift hill. So, you've decreased this from almost 600 feet to, about 300 feet. Which it's not only gives you a lot more room to work with, but it's way less expensive because if you think about the support structure that you have to build to hold that much, you've basically decreased the amount of materials and, you've cut that in half essentially. So it's, just a lot cheaper to do it that way. So the cable lift was a big deal.
Right.
It's essentially the same technology that elevators use.
Right. I was going to say, yeah, it sounds like something an elevator would use.
It's also, you'll also hear it called an elevator cable lift. So yeah, it's basically the same technology, just applied on a much larger scale, obviously. So
right.
Obviously more complicated than that, but you get the idea.
Mm-hmm.
Cable lifts nowadays are pretty much outdated, mostly because chain lift technology has progressed to the point that even like modern day Gigas like Orion and Fury 325, they use a chain lift and get to the top of the hill. Not as fast as a cable lift, but fast enough that it's not a problem. So cable lifts aren't really used anymore. There are a couple coasters that Intamin did that used them, like Intimidator 305 has one, Sky Rush has one. So they have been used occasionally, but I don't even think Intamin uses them anymore. I think everything's back to chain lifts now that the technology for those has progressed. So
yeah, I wonder why.
I think just the motor, they've been able to get more powerful motors for the chain lifts, and also probably been able to decrease the weight of the chains. So those two things combined, you can speed up how fast the chains are able to go, which makes a difference. So the technology for the cable lift had never really been used. I think technically it had been, but not on this type of scale. And so it was, Intamin hadn't even done it before. Intamin basically just said, this is our idea. So it was really a big gamble for Intamin to kind of come in with this new idea that they've never, I mean, they probably had tried it on a small scale at their facilities, but I mean, you can't try a 300-foot lift hill just in your backyard. So it's kind of something you just use your engineering know-how and, and computer simulations to figure out if you can do it, and then just hope in real world application it works.
Yeah, pray and hope.
So it was a big gamble for them that, obviously paid off. But before signing the contract with Intamin, Cedar Point did offer to Morgan to make, like, they basically showed them Intamin's plans and said, make a counter offer. So, which is kind of interesting. I don't know
how I feel about that.
Yeah, I don't know if that's a thing that's typically done within the amusement industry. I don't know how often other manufacturers are shown what, their competitors offered. Because, like, that's kind of a thing, even in the industry that I work in. Like, if you're, doing a bid for a private label item, a retailer may come back to you and say, can you beat this price? And so that those kinds of negotiations are a thing in other industries, but kind of strange for them for them to say, here's Intamin's proposal. What say ye? So
I don't know, because I feel like, did they show them even like the plans? Because wouldn't like
we're gonna get to that.
I was gonna say, because wouldn't Morgan just copy their plan?
Well, we'll get to that. It's kind of a sticking point later on in the story. So foretelling what is going to happen. Foreboding. Basically, when Morgan took a look at Intamin's, they actually didn't like Intamin's plans. Mostly, not so much the cable lift and the lift hill, not so much. The problem they had with Intamin's layout is they said it was just too short. Morgan's response was, quote, that it had, quote, way too much energy coming into the station and just put a bunch of brakes to scrub it off. So Morgan's basically saying, with that kind of speed, you could just make as long of a layout as you want. And Intamin's basically saying, like, I don't know, the train's probably going, 50, 60 miles per hour when it comes barreling into the brake run at the end.
Right.
So Morgan's basically saying, use that speed and just keep making more coaster. But I think Cedar Point was kind of the opinion that they wanted to go with the less expensive alternative. And Intamin had, a solution for the lift hill and the wheels and things like that. So ultimately, the park decided to sign the deal with Intamin. So we'll get back to Morgan later. So on June 9th, 1999, coaster enthusiasts spotted bright blue Intamin track being delivered to Cedar Point. And of course, enthusiasts can see the way the track is built and like, that's Intamin track. Like,
yeah,
just like a few months ago, there was track delivered to SeaWorld and everyone's like, B&M is doing something with SeaWorld. Cause like you just see the track and you can tell which manufacturer it is. Cause they all have their own, style of track. So finally on June 22nd, 1999, Cedar Point officially announced Millennium Force, the world's first Giga coaster, which was a term that Intamin and Cedar Point coined for coasters exceeding 300 feet in height. So that term, Giga coaster, was coined by Cedar Point and Intamin for Millennium Force. So, and that's just kind of stuck. It does help that all the other Giga coasters in North America have all been built by Cedar Fair. Yeah. So it's easy for them to say Giga coaster because like they're the ones that coined that term. Right. So obviously they're just like, yeah, we're just going to stick with that. So they haven't had to convince other park chains to accept their, the term that they came up with, even though other coaster chains would, I'm sure, just because it's so ubiquitous among the enthusiast community at this point. So, right. But yeah, so here's a little, I think this was like a newspaper or a flyer or something like that. Says that 310 feet tall Cedar Point's monumental new roller coaster will send thrill seekers screaming down an incredible 300-foot drop at an 80-degree angle. So, and then this is like these are a couple of the early renditions that Intamin did for Cedar Point. So, which looks identical to how it turned out. So no real changes in what they presented and what ended up actually being built. So I got a video here. This is not commercial. This is actually, I think, the announcement video for the ride because it's a few minutes long. So we'll go ahead and watch this because it's kind of dramatic, and it'll talk about while the video's playing. I'll go ahead and I'll talk over it because the video goes over the 10 records that Cedar Point broke with Millennium Force. 10 records.
That's insane.
So I'll as the video is throwing those up on the screen, I'll read them off so that those of you that are listening can, obviously you're not watching the video along with us, so you'll be able to hear those. So.
Such a 2000s video.
I know, right?
At the turn of the millennium, there were signs. Was there something out there? A higher intelligence? A mysterious force at work?
So dramatic.
Beyond words. Beyond comprehension. Beyond. What will the new millennium bring? M theory. A shadowy construct fathomed by scientists at their wits' end over the quest for the answer to
what the heck?
Beyond time. Beyond space. Beyond gravity. Beyond dimensions we understand. A natural force simply known as Millennium Force. Somewhere, racing along the edge of the time-space continuum in the universe as we know it. It's out there. Millennium Force. The future is riding on it. Gravity knows no force like Millennium Force. A 2-minute 45-second journey through space and beyond. First hill, 310 feet. 310 feet. The drop, 300 feet. Falling towards Earth at 80 degrees. 80 degrees. 92 miles per hour. 92 miles per hour. Next hill, a nearly inverted turn, 169 feet in the air. Then, into the tunnel. Third hill, 182 feet. Turn. Thunder back to tunnel. Greatest thrill ride ever. Airtime.
Greatest thrill ride ever.
Breathe.
Don't forget.
So, tallest coaster ever, here are the records. Fastest coaster ever. Longest drop on a coaster ever. Steepest non-inversion bank turn. First coaster to use an elevator lift system. Most coasters at one park. Most rides at one park. First ever coaster to top 300 feet. most steel coasters at one park, most coaster track at one park.
Beyond coaster.
And there you go. There's the 10 records they broke.
Giga coaster.
That's pretty awesome.
Millennium Force.
You know, I just realized it, but like they're the actual like symbol that they use, the two lift hills, looks like an M.
Yeah, I think that was the idea, was to look kind of like the coaster, but also look like an M. I think that was the design choice behind that. So yeah, 10 world records broken with the ride. Now, we'll get to this in a second. This was huge among the amusement industry. Like, I read some newspaper articles from that point, and these are just some of the words that were thrown around by some of the journalists. Staggering, Goliath, mammoth, monumental, stratospheric. Like, it was just like, it basically blew everybody's mind that, you know, because we had hit, at this point, 400 feet was, you know, how tall the shuttle coasters were that Intamin had done. So there were 400-foot roller coasters, but to do a full circuit coaster at 300 miles an hour, or 300 miles an hour, at 300 feet was obviously unheard of up until this point. So this was a big deal. Now, a couple of the records that they're claiming there are interesting because, first of all, it claims tallest roller coaster, fastest roller coaster, which both of those are, it depends how you look at it, if those are true or not. So this is the debate amongst the enthusiast industry on whether those technically count. Now, the reason for that is these shuttle coasters that I've been talking about. Now, some enthusiasts don't like to count shuttle coasters because technically the train doesn't reach so like the track is 410 feet tall, but the train doesn't actually hit 410 feet, right? Because they build in a lot of extra space to make sure that the train doesn't go flying off the track or hit the bumper that they put on the end of the track for safety reasons. So that's why full circuit coasters tend to be the coasters that claim records a lot easier. And I found this article that this is from a Cedar Point spokesperson, and it is it's very bold. So the article says, which theme park has the nation's fastest roller coaster? It depends, it seems, on who you ask. Cedar Point says its new Millennium Force ride, rising 310 feet and hitting 92 miles per hour, will be the clear leader when it opens in May. But officials at Six Flags Magic Mountain say that's baloney. Six Flags Superman the Escape, unveiled in 97, is faster, hitting 100 miles per hour. Cedar Point spokeswoman Janice Lifke scoffs at the notion. Cedar Point does not consider Superman the Escape a roller coaster, she sniffs. The much ballyhooed ride, she says, is nothing more than a gussied up free fall.
Shots fired. Wow.
Those are some bold words. And like, I get it. I understand what she's saying because yes, this ride, Superman the Escape, it just launches out of the station, goes up the spike, and then comes back down. Right. That's all it is. It's all about pure speed and going, up this huge spike and then coming right back down. So it's not a complete experience like Millennium Force is. Mm-hmm. So I get that. But to go as far as saying it is not a roller coaster, I think that's a little bold. Yeah. So. I don't know. It's also interesting because Intamin built both of them. So Intamin's like, we could care less. Either way, we hold the record.
Yeah, for real.
So that's pretty funny. Intamin had a couple other technology breakthroughs that weren't specifically developed for Millennium Force, but were developed shortly beforehand and were used on Millennium Force. It would be one of the first coaster trains to feature staggered, tiered seating, or I think Intamin calls it stadium seating. So essentially, and we noticed this when we went on the ride, on each car, the seats in front are lower than the seats in the second row of each car.
I do remember that.
Yeah, and we mentioned how much we like that it kind of gives you more, like you can actually see better even if you're sitting in the second row of a car. So that was fairly new in the industry at that point. I don't think it wasn't the first coaster to have that, but Intamin had just opened a coaster in 99, I think, that debuted that technology. And they had also just introduced the very first magnetic brake system in 1999, which would be used on Millennium Force. Magnetic brakes, as opposed to friction brakes, are much more effective. Basically, you can slow the train down a lot faster, which is basically what allowed Millennium Force to be going so fast through that last overbank turn, and still be able to slow down in time before it got to the station. Friction brakes, it would have had to have a lot, more track to burn off that speed, but magnetic brakes were much more effective. And to this day are the preferred choice of brakes on roller coasters. Pretty much the only brakes used on coasters nowadays, actually. So
Right.
The ride is designed with capacity in mind, as is everything at Cedar Point.
It's smart.
The trains sit 36 guests, which is so much.
That's a lot, yeah.
Especially for two rows, like 2-to-row seating. Like because like B&M coasters have 4-to-row and can sit 36 guests, but to have a train have 36 guests and only be 2 by 2, that's a lot of seats. A very long train.
Yeah.
Also features separate unloading and loading stations to help run 3 trains. I guess the original proposal that Intamin had was just for 2 trains, but Cedar Point said no, we have to have 3 trains, and so Intamin just added a separate unloading station, which basically allows them to have 2 trains in the station and 1 train out on the track. So that causes some problems that we'll get into in a minute here. Construction started in August of 1999. Here's some pictures from construction. Of course, in the snow, as are all of Cedar Point's construction photos.
Still would hate that job so much.
Gosh. This is crazy. You see this picture? Like, the lift hill isn't even finished, and these guys are just sitting on top of the track here doing some work on the lift hill.
Oh.
Like, that's nuts. Like, look at this.
No.
That's pretty crazy.
No.
Yeah, that is Haley's worst nightmare right there.
Well, okay, so listen, we've talked about this before, that I don't mind the height of Millennium Force as long as it continues to go. My fear is getting stuck.
Yep.
Like, because I can't, like, sitting, like, whenever you took me on the Valraven, and you were like, oh, God.
She didn't know it had a holding brake at the top of the
oh my
first
gosh,
drop.
I flipped. I was so mad that he didn't tell me that was on
I just thought she had been
purpose.
watching it beforehand.
No, I was so mad. I was like, it's broken. We are stuck like this. I was so mad. I was freaking out. So when it dropped, of course, it was a lot of fun after that. But it was still like one of the scariest roller coaster experiences for me, because I was like, holy cow, it's broken. We're going to be stuck here. I'm like, yeah.
Good times.
Yeah, for you. So.
Oh.
Anyways, but it was, yeah. So getting stuck at the top of this would freak me out.
Yeah, I get that.
So those guys are brave.
As kudos to construction workers on roller coasters.
They've got a good view at least, but still,
it is a great view. Yeah. The Ferris wheel was originally where the coaster is now, so the Ferris wheel is actually relocated over onto the other side of the park where it sits nowadays. So I think they started that literally the day the park closed for the 1999 season. All right, I've got some construction stats for you because I know you like those. I
do like the construction stats.
226 steel supports with 226 concrete footers. Makes sense.
I would hope so.
The footers came out to 99,400 square yards of concrete. 229 track pieces made up the ride. Each piece of track weighs between 11,000 and 17,000 pounds apiece.
That's a lot.
That's crazy to me. I'm sure that's normal, but I've just never heard that stat before, which is kind of interesting. That means the coaster's total weight comes in at over 3 million pounds.
Holy cow. That's actually kind of a cool stat to read.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. 19,000 bolts. The cable for the lift hill is 1,100 feet long. The entire layout covers a span of 13 acres. So that's crazy.
That is insane.
Despite the massive scale of the project, though, 120 construction workers managed to finish the project in 7 months. So that's pretty impressive. During the cold winter of northern Ohio, they managed to build this huge coaster in 7 months. That's pretty impressive.
I mean, good for them.
So,
I wouldn't want to do that.
So, gave the park and Intamin plenty of time to test the ride and everything before opening day. I could only imagine as guests started arriving for opening day, because the way the park is situated, when you pull out onto the causeway, once you get out of the trees, Millennium Force is like it's on the side of the park that faces inland.
Right.
And so, like, it would be it's like front and center when you get onto that bridge. Like just the experience of like pulling onto the bridge and just seeing that, that coaster dominating the skyline above all the other coasters. That would be like you and I, like,
driving into like Silver Dollar City and being able to see.
And seeing like some 300-foot coaster just towering above. Like, that's just a crazy experience to me. Like, I can imagine just the anticipation must have been like you could have cut it with a knife.
Yeah.
Right. So
I feel like with Kennywood too, like you walk through the park and seeing a steel curtain, like that is such a shocking ride.
Yeah.
Because you're walking through it so often.
Oh, and it's so visible from everywhere in the park.
Yeah.
And outside the park. Like, yeah.
So that one's like a very comparable, I guess, in terms of that. So
Millennium Force would open to the public on May 13th, 2000, and continues to operate to this day. The ride experience is as follows. While the train is being loaded with passengers, the catch car for the cable lift descends the lift hill and latches onto the fourth car underneath the train. Once the train is cleared, the cable lift pulls the train up the 45-degree lift hill. The train crests the lift hill and drops 300 feet at an 80-degree angle and reaches its top speed of 93 miles per hour. It then climbs 169 feet through a right overbank turn at 122 degrees, dives back down to ground level, then travels through a low-to-the-ground left turn through a tunnel as it passes over the Frontier Trail. It then travels over a 182-foot hill over a lagoon and down onto Adventure Island. It completes a 105-foot right-hand helix, followed by a left overbank turn. It then completes a small right-hand turn before traveling over another hill to leave the island. The train then travels left through a second tunnel where the on-ride photo is taken. Exiting the tunnel, the train goes over a small speed hill and a slight left turn, passing by the queue. Finally, the train travels 68 feet high through one more overbank turn to the right, over the queue, and into the final brakes. So there was pretty much no doubt among anybody that was there during the opening days of the coaster. Millennium Force was a huge success. It was everything Cedar Point wanted it to be. There were some issues, which we'll go to in a second, but I mean, it was working properly. It broke all the records they set out to break. Cedar Point had successfully hit the 300-foot mark before any other park could get there. And that's a statistic that will stand the test of time. That is ingrained into roller coaster history, that Cedar Point was the first to get to 300 feet. So that will never change. This is a quote from Rob Alvey of Theme Park Review. Was that actually, that may have been the same company that had the graphs from earlier. That's a funny coincidence. I didn't even think about that.
Theme Park what?
Theme Park Review, is that?
No, it was Theme Park.
Oh, Theme Park Tourist. Theme Park Tourist,
yeah.
not Theme Park Review. Here's some pictures from, I don't know if these are from opening day, but these are certainly from opening year. These are from 2000. So the quote from Rob Alvey said, quote, "It's a milestone in roller coaster history," end quote, which is definitely true.
That's very true, yeah.
Coaster was so popular in its opening year, it was not uncommon for wait times to reach 3 to 4 hours.
It's like new
That
level.
is crazy. So they installed a DJ booth over by the queue to provide entertainment for guests, and you could actually make song requests, which is kind of
cool.
Yeah. So the lines got so bad that the park officials would implement an early version of a fast pass system called Ticket to Ride. Ultimately, it was a flop though, because I guess people complained about it. Like, I don't know. I think the idea behind it, if I remember correctly, it was actually supposed to be similar to Disney's callback system, where it was like they would give you a time to come back and ride it. But then like people that waited in the ride instead of getting the ticket to ride would get upset that they weren't getting on the ride. Like they would just get in line because they're like, oh, the line's so short. And then they'd be in line just as long as, because the people that were coming back with their return times would get on the coaster before them. So I don't know. They discontinued it after a few years because it wasn't working the way they hoped. And then obviously they brought Fastlane back at some point. But I did mention earlier, the ride was not without its issues. It seems one of the reasons the lines were so long was Intamin had incorrectly estimated the ride's capacity, which is a big problem.
Right.
So I'm not going to go into all the details because if you're an enthusiast and like to dive into the nitty gritty stuff like I do, go and check out El Toro Ryan's videos on Millennium Force. He has 2 of them. And he really gets to the details on like how the ride operates and some of the issues with capacity. He was actually one of the ride operators for a couple summers, I think.
Cool.
So he really knows the ins and outs of the operations of the ride. And so if you want to understand all the individual details, go and check that out. I'll just give you the high level stuff. Basically, the downside of a cable lift is, like I said, it's not continuous. You have to wait for it to come back down the hill to grab the next train.
Right.
And Millennium Force can theoretically dispatch every 72 seconds based on the length of the ride, like how fast the train goes through the layout. The problem is the cable lift takes about 100 seconds to cycle from bottom to top, back to bottom. So Intamin's original estimate on the capacity was based on the 72 seconds, and they didn't take into account that the cable lift could not cycle fast enough to dispatch every 72 seconds. So even if you're dispatching every 100 seconds, that decreases the amount of trains per hour from 50 to 36, which is a big decrease in your capacity. So that's a problem. So a couple other issues they had. Despite the technological advancements in coaster wheels, Millennium Force rarely ran 3 trains in its opening year because they were constantly changing the wheels. Like, constantly. Like,
just because it was so popular, or
like they'd run the train for I don't know how many days or hours they could run it, but then they'd have to take it off and replace the wheels because the wheels were just toast. Like,
that's insane.
That is nuts.
So did they have to rethink the wheels, or
they did, and nowadays it's not a problem, but they've developed better materials and polymers and different things like that it's no longer an issue. But back then it was like, even with the technological advancements that Intamin brought to the table, it was still like they had to have one train off pretty much the whole season just to perform maintenance. It's crazy. So the cable was intended to last for 2 years. 4 months after it opening, it broke on Labor Day weekend of all times.
Oh, ouch.
Yeah, that's no good. This is crazy too. Check this out. It was discovered at some point that this support, I actually don't know where this is in the layout, but somewhere along the layout, there's a support that they discovered was too close to the track. And that, like, if a guest with really long arms were to reach out,
So Colin.
could have hit their hand on the support. I don't think it actually happened. It just was discovered that it could. So you can actually see in this picture, they cut a little notch out of the support and then put a brace on the back of it to support it. And it's still like that to this day. So
That's kind of sketchy.
yeah, I don't know how that happened. But anyway, I'm glad they caught it. So
Could you? Colin would totally be the one to reach out to.
yeah, I don't know how long your wingspan would have had to be for that to happen, but
My brother is really tall.
yeah.
So.
Yeah. So those are some of the issues they dealt with. Obviously not as bad as some issues that we've had with other coasters, but the capacity issue, that's kind of a big deal. And El Toro Ryan actually goes to talk that nowadays the coaster's only running based on dispatch times and other issues. Like, I actually don't know if I mentioned it in here. The lift hill broke in like 2018 and they had to replace it with a new one that's not as fast as the old one was. So the dispatch times are even even worse now than they used to be.
Interesting.
So they're only running it at like 700 riders per hour right now, which is terrible.
Yeah.
That's terrible. That's like Maverick capacity, which Maverick has tiny little trains. So yeah, that's no good. So that's probably why it continues to have really long lines, even though the trains are huge. So one of the things that's really popular about the ride is the cue music has become some of the most famous music in the amusement industry. I'll just play some of the music here. So
It's a bop.
yeah, not bad. It's pretty catchy. So this is playing in the station, both the load and the unload station. I'll just turn this down. We don't need to listen to the whole thing, but it's playing in the station and the unload station. In fact, I think if I remember correctly, there's like the ride op that says like you can push down and pull up on your lap bar and thank you for riding Millennium Force, and then it goes. Like the music kicks in right after he's done talking. So like the music is very like popular among enthusiasts, and like I would guarantee there are some enthusiasts that's their ringtone.
Surprised it's not your ringtone.
I mean it's pretty good, but Millennium Force it's not like my number one, but some enthusiasts it still is. So, but it's pretty good. I think I'll even the outro music. I usually use our Airtime Traveler theme. I think I might use the Millennium Force cue music for our outro music on this episode, just for kicks and giggles.
Yeah.
You ready to talk Morgan?
Yeah.
This is where the story gets.
I was wondering when you were going to bring it back up again.
Yeah, this is where we get back to Morgan. So, just a few months after Millennium Force opened. So, I actually didn't put the date down here. That's my bad. But I think it was in like August. It's like, just a few months after Millennium Force opened. Morgan would open Steel Dragon 2000 at Nagashima Spa Land in Japan. And it broke the record for height, drop, and speed from Millennium Force. Just like 3 or 4 months after Millennium Force opened.
I would be so mad.
Cedar Point officials were livid.
I don't blame them.
Because so here's a lot of this is just hearsay, but here's from what I can gather the story, right? So Morgan is involved with this project. They know that Cedar Point's going for 300 feet, right? So after they lose the bid, they essentially are like, well, we've done all this work on this 300-foot coaster. We might as well sell the plans to some other park, right?
Interesting.
And so they talked to Nagashima Spa Land, and they're all over it. And because they know what Cedar Point was going for, they can guarantee Nagashima Spa Land that they can break all the records. And so they did. Just a few months later, they opened this, and they stole all of Millennium Force's records just a few months
Wonder
later.
what kind of lawsuits they got into.
Nothing. I mean,
Seriously.
there was no. I mean, they probably had non-disclosure agreements that they had to sign so that they didn't prematurely reveal what the details of Millennium Force were.
Yeah.
But that doesn't prevent them from going and doing their own thing with their own coaster. So there's no legal implications to what they did.
So have they used Morgan again since then?
They have not.
I was going to
And
say.
Morgan actually is not even. They sold. They're technically still a thing because Chance bought all of their assets. So, and Chance is still doing coasters nowadays. But Morgan, this was basically Morgan's last big project. Well, Phantom's Revenge is probably the last big thing Morgan did, I guess. I would have to sit and think and make sure that's accurate. But yeah, Cedar Fair never did anything with Morgan again after this, which probably was because Morgan wasn't happy with Cedar Fair either. Because like I said earlier, they basically had like the contract was all but signed before Intamin came into the picture. So I think both parties kind of felt they were wronged by the other.
Right.
So I think both parties were kind of happy to part ways. So, but it is kind of fascinating.
Yeah.
So this coaster is interesting though, because this is still open to this day, and it is still the longest roller coaster in the world at I got the stat here, 8,133 feet. And you can, I mean, you look
That's
at this picture.
Long coaster.
So it goes up the hill, right? And comes down this massive drop, has these big airtime hills. And then it comes into like this sweeping like figure 8 helix section. Yeah. And then it comes back and look at these like 1, 2, 3, 4,
Those
5,
airtime
6,
hills.
7 airtime hills on the way back. So essentially, remember when Morgan said Intamin just made a really short layout and then just put a bunch of breaks at the end of it? And Morgan was like, we think you should do a longer layout. This is essentially what Morgan would have done at Cedar Point, would be a huge layout like this. So
what's this one rated versus Millennium Force?
If you ask enthusiasts, they are both pretty highly rated, but most enthusiasts will tell you Millennium Force is better. Now, that being said, Millennium Force gets... I am an American enthusiast, so I'm more familiar with I interact more with enthusiasts here.
Right.
If you ask a Japanese enthusiast, they may have a completely different opinion.
Right.
So there, because there is some bias just based on the region that you live in. But yeah, it's kind of interesting. So generally speaking, people like Intamin more than Morgan. So I think that's part of why people like Millennium Force better. But this one still gets a lot of praise. A lot of people say it's really good. And it got new trains, I think, in 2015, 2013, somewhere in there. Got new B&M trains, which people say have made it the best it's ever been. So anyway, it's interesting. Some rumors say that some Cedar Fair officials actually told Morgan later on that they wished they had gone with them, which Dana Morgan is the one that said that. And he said that made him kind of smooth things over a little bit, but still at that point they had basically just parted ways and it was what it was. But the one big thing that is a difference, the rumor, it's not officially published, but people have estimated this coaster cost $50 million, which is twice as much as Millennium Force.
Yeah.
So if you're talking bang for your buck, I think Cedar Point got the better bargain. Like, I think they, even if you're going to say this one is better, it's not so much better that you could say it's worth an extra $25 million. So is what it is. In the 2000 Golden Ticket Awards, Millennium Force somehow lost. But they built the first 300-foot coaster, and it did not win the Golden Ticket Award for best coaster in 2000. The winner was Superman the Ride at Six Flags New England, which is the same model as Millennium Force, but some enthusiasts say it has a better layout, just more airtime, more. It's still a very highly rated coaster to this day. In fact, when we went to Cedar Point, my dad was asking us about it as we were waiting in line. And he was like, it looks kind of like that Superman ride I went on at Six Flags New England. And I was like, well, funny you should say that, because it's the same model, just 100 feet taller. And he's like, whoa, that's great. Like, he was so excited because he's like, I thought that ride was tall and this one's 100 feet taller. Like,
Yeah.
So that was pretty fun. But that being said, Millennium Force would finally pass it in 2001 and would win the award for best steel coaster in the world in 2001. And Millennium Force has always been really popular in the Golden Ticket Awards, like more popular than it should be, probably, if I'm being honest. It's won the Golden Ticket Award for best coaster 10 times.
That's pretty crazy.
And it's been in the top 2 every year since it opened until last year it finished 3rd.
That's pretty wild.
That's crazy. There have been so many coasters that have opened in the last 23 years.
I don't know. I would pick something different, but it's just me.
Yeah, I mean, so Fury 325, when it opened in 2015, Fury 325, I think, has won every year since then. I'd have to double check on that. But I know Fury 325 won this past year. Steel Vengeance finished number 2, and Millennium Force finished number 3. But still, to me, there's plenty of steel coasters I would put ahead of Millennium Force. Maverick? Mm-hmm. Maverick is so good. Twisted
Maverick.
Timbers? Like, come on. Like, I love Millennium Force, but number 3? Really?
Yeah.
I don't even rank it 3rd in my rankings, and I haven't even been on all the steel coasters in the country, so... Anyway, I think it's a little overrated in the Golden Ticket Awards, but I mean, it's 15th.
Don't tell the Golden Ticket Awards that.
I know Cedar Point's never going to invite us to a media event.
Maybe we should edit that out.
But I mean, like, I feel other enthusiasts feel the same way because it's 15th in the Coaster Bot rankings. So, I mean, clearly it's very good. It's very popular, but number 3, I think it's a little overrated for number 3. So. 10, let's see. Despite the issues with the ride, Cedar Point would keep working with Intamin because in 2004, they would just completely obliterate the coaster record by opening Top Thrill Dragster and getting to 400 feet just a few years later. And then shortly after that, they would open Maverick in 2007. So basically the trio of Intamins that would open in the early 2000s.
I still don't know if I'm ever going to get on Top Thrill Dragster.
Well, it's Top Thrill 2 now. That's
whatever. I don't. I just even still looking at pictures like makes me queasy. I'm like,
it's intense. I can't wait to go back to Cedar Point to try it.
Yeah. I'm so excited.
My dad keeps saying he's going to go there in the summer and ride Top Thrill 2.
Okay.
I don't know if he's serious or not.
I don't know. I think he's crazy.
Yeah. 10 years after Millennium Force opened, Intamin would open their second Giga coaster, which is Intimidator 305. Mm-hmm. The coaster was kind of like a hybrid between the big hills of Millennium Force and the low to ground turns of Maverick. And when I read that, I was kind of like, yeah, that actually kind of makes sense. I could see this as like a Millennium Force Maverick hybrid. Now, this coaster also had its issues, which when we do an Intimidator 305 episode, we'll talk about that because this coaster had problems too. Probably even more so than Millennium Force did.
Yeah.
And since then, Intamin has yet to build another Giga coaster. And Cedar Fair, after Intimidator 305, basically said, yeah, I think we're done with you, Intamin. And I think I'd have to go back and see. I think they've done some stuff with Intamin, but nothing to this scale since Intimidator 305. It just, between Millennium Force and I-305, they were just like, yeah, well, I don't think so. So all 3 of their Giga coasters since then have been B&M instead of Intamin, which I think they've been much happier with the result of those.
Yeah.
So kind of interesting. Let's see. The park, when they first opened the ride, had a light system under the lift hill, kind of lighted up at night. And they installed a new light system in 2012, which I must say it looks really nice.
Looks good.
It looks fantastic at night.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't get to ride it at night just because of the time of year we were there and the park hours.
Yeah.
But we did go and drive on the peninsula after the park,
really
after
pretty.
it was dark, and it was just really cool to see the coaster at night. It looks very great.
Mm-hmm.
So, In 2015, they replaced the stainless steel trains with new fiberglass trains. I think the trains are actually the same, but they just replaced the shells on the outside. The new fiberglass bodies made it slightly lighter, so supposedly it runs a little bit faster, but not crazy.
Not like
faster.
noticeably faster.
Not noticeably. And then, but it is less bumpy nowadays, from what I hear, than before when they had the stainless steel trains. So statistics on ridership: it had 1.7 million riders in 2000, 1.9 million in 2001. And then it's averaged about 1.6 to 1.7 every year since then until the past few years. The capacity has just been terrible, like I mentioned earlier, like 700 riders per hour. So some people think it's not even going to hit 1 million this year. They hit 750,000 like 3 weeks ago. So they'd really have to crank it out to hit 1 million riders this year, which would be insane for Millennium Force to not hit 1 million riders. So
maybe it won't win Golden Ticket this year because.
Well, I don't think that will impact it as much. But it's just crazy to me that the park has basically let the capacity just completely tank. I don't know what that's about, but anyway, it's really should be getting more attention than it's getting right now. So. Some enthusiasts like to call the ride Millennium Forceless, which I think is, I think that's a little dumb.
Just the haters, or
yeah, some people, I don't know. They're comparing it to Intimidator 305, which makes you black out, and things like Sky Rush that try to fling you to the moon, and they're like, it doesn't do either of those things, so it's boring. And you're like, just calm down. I think that's a little aggressive. I think the ride is still plenty intense. It's not Intimidator 305. It's not Sky Rush, but it's a great ride, and it's still 93 miles an hour. I don't think I could never call a coaster that fast boring. I don't get that, but just to kind of wrap this up, I guess, just talk a little bit. Oh, wait, no, I have one more story here. And I think you saw this was like a month ago that a duck accidentally rode Millennium Force. Do you remember that?
Yes.
So here, I've got this here.
Millie the duck.
Is that what that people are calling it? The duck Millie?
I don't know what they're calling it, but I named it Millie the duck.
Well, that's funny because that's what people call Millennium Force.
Millie?
They call it Millie.
The duck's name should be Millie then.
People have nicknames for all the coasters at Cedar Point. Like they call Steel Vengeance Steve.
Okay.
And then Mav for Maverick. I mean, that was pretty straightforward. So anyway,
Millie. That's
Millie the duck.
Cute.
There you go.
Come on, name the duck Millie.
Yeah. So if you haven't seen this story, basically they don't know exactly what happened, but when the train pulled into the station, there was a duck on the train. So they don't know if it snuck in there while the ride was in motion. Like if it was, they think it must have happened either on the lift hill. I mean, it had to have been the lift. There's no way it got stuck in there during the
actual
full speed.
No, it's not fast
And it
enough.
wouldn't have been the station because the ride attendants would have noticed it before then.
Yeah.
So it had to have been on the lift hill. It just flew in.
My only other thought could have been the brakes from the previous train.
I mean, I guess it could have been on the brake run, and then people think it took a full ride, but it actually just was on the brake run. I don't know. But all I know is the train pulled in the station, and there was a duck. And so a guest noticed it and pulled when they got off, and they grabbed the duck, and they took it to a facility, and it's actually, from what I hear, the duck is being returned to a wildlife reserve. So there's a happy ending to the story. But
this duck's friends being like, "Yeah, buddy, you did it, man! You did it!" This duck is legend.
Yeah, that is. I remember when I saw this picture on Twitter the first time, I was like, that's pretty funny. I thought someone edited the picture, and then it started blowing up, and I was like, oh my gosh, that actually happened.
Got the
That's
duck.
crazy. This is from Fox News, so this made mainstream headlines when this happened. Yeah. So there you go. Millennium Force still making headlines 23 years later. It's pretty funny. So just to wrap it up now, just to talk a little bit about this coaster is just legendary among enthusiasts, right? Like, not just because of what it did for the coaster industry. Like, the coaster wars, obviously, we've talked about a lot, but this really spurred it on. And obviously we went to 400 feet, and then Six Flags went to 450 feet, and then we just stopped. But, this was right in the middle of it, and Cedar Point was not afraid to go for 300. And
right.
This coaster's so popular that even when I'm talking to people that are like just curious to know more about my hobby, and like, I've had several people ask me like, what's your favorite park? And I'm like, I mean, probably Cedar Point. It was probably the park that's had some of my favorite coasters. And they're like, oh, isn't that the one that has like Millennium Force? Is that the one it's called? So like, this coaster's like ingrained into people's memory, especially people that are maybe a little bit older than us that remember when it opened.
Yeah.
Like, so it's just been fascinating. Lots of people, even, GP, know about this ride and the how legendary it is. So it's certainly been one of the most successful and legendary roller coasters to ever open. And it's, basically been the pioneer for the roller coasters of the 21st century. So I would not be surprised if Millennium Force receives an Ace Landmark Award very soon. And like we talked about in our last episode, the Raven is the most recently constructed in 1990. What was that, 95, I think? Mm-hmm. And that's the most recently constructed coaster to receive the award. I think Millennium Force could very easily in the next year. I would give it to it now. If it were up to me, I would say it's already reached that status in my mind.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It at the very least, it should be the first post-2000 roller coaster to receive the award in my eyes. So definitely a legend and a very, very fun ride. So,
yeah.
And that is the history of Millennium Force at Cedar Point.
Cue music.
There you go. Cue the Well, thank you for tuning in to episode 30 of Airtime Traveler. Just like we mentioned again at the beginning of the episode, but thank you so much for your support. For if this is your first time listening, or if you've listened to all 30 episodes, we're grateful that you tune in to learn more about the history of these roller coasters, and we enjoy sharing that history with you. So, and it's been a lot of fun, and we're looking forward to continuing to do so. So
yeah, you guys should leave us requests too. If you guys have like a favorite roller coaster that you want to hear us talk about in the future, be sure to mention it, because we'd love to.
That's true. And you get your requests in now, because I planned these episodes. Like, I've already got the rest of season 2 planned out. So if you want to request in, you're making season 3 requests now. So if you want to be sure to go and follow us on social media. We're at Instagram and the app formerly known as Twitter. Our handle is just at Airtime Traveler. Like I said, we're having lots of discussions over there, but you can also see all the pictures and videos that I showed Haley throughout today's episode. So you can be sure and go and see all those and watch the video of the super dramatic video from Millennium Force's announcement. So I think that's all I have. Any further thoughts from the GP?
Nope.
Well,
Don't get stuck on the top of it.
Millennium Force, the future is riding on it.
Yep.
There's a conclusion.
Yep. There you go. That's my conclusion. Is just don't get stuck at the top.
Don't get stuck.
Actually, do you remember we passed it and there was
people stuck? It was stuck one time when we were there. So
no, thank you. No, thank you.
Well, thank you for tuning in to this episode, and we will see you in the next one.